I don't get it. Agents don't podcast. I don't have time to listen to a podcast. Why should we podcast for our brand? We should use YouTube. YouTube's better. I've heard it all before. And I haven't just heard it all before with podcasts. I heard it all before many years ago when I started a telecoms business. It's the same. Whenever there's a situation where most people don't get it, then you're doing something right. I.e., you see something the market doesn't see. And then it's all about whether or not your validation of your conviction is right. Of course, you could just be mad and therefore people don't get it. But ideally, you've done some research. You've seen the patterns. And I think you get really good at identifying distant signals, especially when you spend your life as an outsider. And I class myself as an outsider looking in. I.e., I spent most of my life living outside of my original culture of birth. I was born in England, but, I've been living in Asia off and on for the last 20 years. I know, here's the thing, is that also on top of that, I have been living in different cultures. I've traveled the world for 4 years non-stop, living out of a suitcase with my family. Outsiders. When you're an outsider, you learn to read signals really fast. You understand who's who, what the social dynamic is, and you learn how to fit in. It's like being the new boy at school. And I was counting, when I was a kid, I moved schools and education institutions about 8 or 9 different times. So that scene that you see played in high school movies where the new boy has to choose which seat to sit on when he's got his lunch tray in his hand. That's real. I've lived that many, many times, whether I was the new boy aged 6 or 46. You learn to adapt in those situations. And what you learn is the ability to read signals. So when people tell you that I don't get it, what you're effectively saying is that you've read signals that they don't see yet. In 1997, I saw young female high school girls in Japan bring Pocket Bell pagers into class and show me these devices that they had got from their dads, which were given to their dads as field sales guys of IT products in Japan, selling copiers and scanners and so on. But they weren't really using them. The girls took these, the daughters of these field sales guys, and they started using them. And they found out actually that even though it was only numbers, they could actually tap out sequences in these pages to send messages to friends. So, for example, you would type in 4682000, which would translate in Japanese to Shibuya 2000, which basically may meet me at Shibuya at 8 o'clock. So this was the beginning of tech speak before people started inventing things like see you later or even text messaging, which then came on board in Europe in the late 90s and early 2000s. Young Japanese high school girls were at it. They were at it corrupting the technology and using it for their purposes. And when I saw this, I said, wow, this is amazing, because nobody is driving this apart from these consumers effectively, and they have to go through many barriers to make this work. It's not like they're just trying something and then they think it's a bit of a fad and then giving up. And I saw plenty of fads in Japan in my time. I saw the Tamagotchi come and go, for example. But the mobile phone and the Pocket Bell pager didn't go away. So by the time that I'd left Japan in the late 90s and went back to the UK, and I was walking down the high street in the UK into mobile phone stores, and I saw bricks sitting in displays and wondering what the hell was going on, saying to these people, I've seen young people using really tiny phones and you're selling these phones at 5 times the price with no functionality. What's going on? Now, the problem is, what was going on is that the incumbent telcos were run by old white guys selling to old white guys. And I thought, well, this is ripe for change. So I set up a research business and I knocked on the door of telcos and I said, I'm doing research about how young people use mobile phones. And this is 1998, 1999. And I remember knocking on the doors of Nokia, and Nokia said, we don't do kids. So what was going on? what was going on is that they didn't read the signals that I was reading, and they thought that their market was where the money was, i.e. the people who had the most money now, not who was the most potential value to them tomorrow. And I said, no, I've seen the future, and I think it's young teenagers and girls in particular using phones to share messages and share content and stay connected. And I was laughed at. People didn't get it. But then my first clients came on board, and they weren't telcos necessarily. They were companies like MTV and Disney. And MTV and Disney, some of my best clients during the time that I worked at Mobile Youth, were interested in my research, not because they were necessarily interested in creating mobile products, because they wanted to have a better understanding of their customer. So I managed to get a better understanding of what they knew, and then took that information, sold it back to companies like Vodafone and Nokia, etc. And we rode the wave. For the best part of 6 or 7 years, we were the only company in the world doing youth mobile research. We had companies phone us from all over the world. We sold our research into 65 markets. And we were on TV. I was on CNN, CNBC, BBC. We got in the Wall Street Journal. I even got in the Sun. I spoke at the UN, and I wrote a report with the UN and UNICEF on children and technology. I wrote a book. I helped shape the communication strategies of brands like Nokia, and also later in my career, brands like Monster Energy. And it was a lot of fun. We read the signals before everybody else. And it made a lot of money, and it enabled me to enjoy a 4-year sabbatical in my life and go and travel the world. But I've seen it happen again. And I think we're back where we were in 1998. Here come the distant signals. Here come those signals that you understand that the rest of the market don't get. And that is podcasting. So like mobile technology, it's been around for a long time. But it's only when people start using it in a certain way do you see the opportunity. And it's not necessarily because it's the opportunity for those people with the money and using it in this way, but it's the opportunity coming from this group of people which you see have the most emotional vested interest in using the technology, this decentralized technology tool which is helping them tell their story. And that could be the same as it was back in 1998 with text messaging, as it is today in podcasting. And I'm seeing young women consume and create podcast content. And that gives me hope, because nobody else gets it. What they're not getting is the idea that this will be a communications tool for many brands and for many podcasters and for many companies. They see podcasting only in the same way that people saw mobile phones back in the day, which was this is a tool to help us sell to these people. And that was back then selling to old white guys, and today it's all about how can we turn this into advertising? How can we get money out of podcast advertising, insert ads into podcasts? And I'm saying that ain't the future. That's a $500 million market. I'm talking about a $1.1 trillion market, which is all advertising, all brand authority, PR, and all recruitment and talent. SMS made $1 trillion for mobile operators. Think about that. $1 trillion for mobile operators. And the irony is that they didn't see it. You know, SMS was originally built into the GSM protocol. Now, the GSM protocol contained SMS not as a communications tool because it was only 160 characters long. It was in the GSM protocol for network engineers to send test messages. And I actually remember coming back to the UK, and then in 1998, getting my first phone and getting this thing called a text message, which I've never seen before. And it said, test, ignore. And it had been sent by a network engineer, just to test things were okay. Nobody could ever imagine that this could become a decentralized communication tool. And mobile operators, even when young people started using it, didn't get it. They didn't get it because it was free. They never thought that this could be a paid value-added service. They never could have conceived in their wildest dreams that this could be a $1 trillion product. So it was free. And then they realized that these young people, they're not interested in paying money to subscribe to voice. They just want text messaging. In the same way, I feel that when people look at podcasts today, people aren't interested in ad inserts in podcasts. You can get a better service on YouTube or Facebook. What they're interested in is using podcasts as communications. So when operators started charging for SMS, they actually started making a lot of money. In fact, $1 trillion worth of money. I feel we're here again. Distant signals, communication technology, decentralized storytelling, a technology which is both consumed and driven at the fringes by young women, and companies who own the platforms who don't get it. And that is exciting because it means we have a lot of people to prove wrong. And here's the best thing. I'm an investor. I invest in real estate. And if you invest in real estate, one of the things that you see is there are two types of investors. There are amateur investors in real estate and there are professional investors in real estate. And one of the things that distinguishes the amateur investor and the professional investor is this. An amateur investor will look for and invest in what looks good to other people. Whereas a professional investor will look for what looks bad to other people. So in the context of real estate, it's this. An amateur investor will get excited by those marketing suites. You know, those off-plan developments where they have these very flash displays and then they show you the product vision of what this thing is and all those kind of like ethnically diverse, and even here in Asia, lots of blonde people walking around with their families in the complex that they are selling to people. It's that dream that they're selling, the marketing suite. And you walk away thinking, yes, this is going to be great. It's going to create all this capital growth. And oh, by the way, did you know that David Beckham's also just bought a unit at the top? These are the kind of dreams that people get excited about and ultimately why people lose money. Because as soon as they buy that, the first thing that happens is people start selling their units and start renting them out, and then the prices drop. The reason why these are not great investments is because all the value is priced in. Whereas a professional investor looks at things differently. They don't want the marketing suite because there's no uplift. What they're looking for are those mispriced assets. They're looking for that end of terrace 3-bedroom house which is currently owned by a family and it's a bit run down and it's got the carpets that smell of cat's piss. And when walk-in buyers look at it, they walk away just, ugh, I don't want to touch that. But a professional investor looks at that and thinks, actually, with new carpets, new kitchen, paint work, and maybe we can convert the back unit, there's a lot of uplift here. We can turn this into 2x2 bed units and we can rent it out to professionals and we can create a serious uplift in the value. This is a huge mispriced asset because it has poor walk-up value. If that investor was to spend a lot of money on converting this property and then sell it back on the market, everything's already priced in. So investors should look for those mispriced assets. And I believe podcasts are that, because we're not yet at the stage where everybody agrees that this is the future. There's only a few people that are hardcore, devoutly into podcasts, which is absolutely great because by the time this comes round to mass market, it's too late. All the gains are priced into podcasts. So I feel it's where we are in 1998 with communications technology. The fact that a lot of people say they don't get it is a great sign, because when everybody's telling me they do get it, it's too late.